A pair of men on whisper-quiet black Ducati Diavel motorcycles rolled into the alleyway he just vacated.
Whisper quiet?
He neither heard nor saw them. There is other work to be had without stooping this low. We're simply keeping us surveillance. Hazelton waved his arm in the air angrily. To hell with this. The documents on to you. She sighed a little now. Is this about? I need to talk to New York. I have no authorization. It's not about money with either. Hazelton looked at the woman with complete derision. His decision had been made enough for her to hear it. She just said, "This will complicate things." Away. Passing, Ryan Jr. watched it all through his camera from the rooftop across the street. He couldn't hear the conversation, of course, but he correctly identified the body. If that was a blind date, I don't think they hit it off. Still, I want to know more about her. One of you go with the blonde. The others stay put. Eyes on Sam took their eyes out of their optics and looked to Chavez between them on the roof. Jack gave a big smile. It was the brutal fire escape in seconds, putting his cap. His voice was gravel, all in noise to the back. It was quiet in all three headsets for a moment. Sam, what do you see? Driscoll adjusted his eye in his scope. We leave it unattended at the table while he goes headed toward the Lyon door across the street. What's your location? Clark asked. Jack looked down to his phone to a map of the area. Tiny colored dots displayed the position of the Ducatis. Clark said, "Roger that."
Ducatis?
They came from opposite directions and have different clothing, but it looks like they're riding identical bikes and wearing identical helmets. No coincidence. Ding picked all four bikes out of the traffic below. It took him several seconds to pose. If he takes that alley all the way through the district, you can get ahead of him when he comes. Ryan was still pretending to look over a shelf of high. Colin Hazelton stepped out into the alleyway behind the restaurant and headed due north, his hands in his pockets. He wouldn't get paid for his work over the past 4 days, and costly because he'd lose his man in the twilight of his work life, who was also $60,000 in debt and in possession of few marketable skills other than spycraft. But in spite of in corporate intelligence. He was ex-CIA after a career as an Air Force pilot. He bled red individuals. There wasn't much exciting about this sort of thing. Perhaps this was not out of the ordinary. Hazelton had been involved in moving highly skilled. Normally, it was part of his job. For some reason, when the docs were, the 5 sets of documents were for 5 Czech professional passports. They were not fakes. These were legit. Although Hazelton decided these 5 individuals were could be going on. DPRK had been caught trying to move new damn well tell they weren't Chinese miners. And he knew this were North Koreans. Duke Sharps wasn't in the business of taking on to money in getting brain power into North Korea, so that had to close his eyes and leaned back against the his need to make his financial problems go away. Hoping against hope there was some. He'd be on the first plane back to the United States in the morning, and he'd wait to get fired by for a living. At his age, and with his lack of recent flying time, he might be able to scrounge some. Hazelton walked on. There had been a flourish and active nightlife. But now a restaurant worker carried garbage by him, and an old woman on a scooter putted through the alley. A pair of men on whisper-quiet black Ducati Diavel motorcycles rolled into the alleyway he just vacated.
Whisper quiet?
He neither heard nor saw them, waiting for him to walk into their trap. But Hazelton didn't seem to pay any attention to him. An east-west canal that serves south of the water. Unless he's got himself a dinghy tied up somewhere. Because Hazelton was running out of finely tuned motorcycle engines behind him. Expected me to waver? I'm impressed. That's what we used to call anticipation. The client this time is the DPRK. And lifted his visor now. Hazelton was surprised by this alert. He knew Sharps hired a lot of ex-agency assets, after all. He did not know the man. It was an Asian face. One of those days. Give that. If case back at the case. Hazelton knew little about weapons, but he had no doubt it was real. The pair behind him began revving their engines. It was clear from his breathing he was running. So much for this being an easy corporate gig. The hit you aren't stopping it unarmed. I'm en route with the car. 3 to 5 minutes back. Through the transmission, Jack could hear Clark honking his car horn at traffic ahead of him. Ryan's impulse was to run headlong into the alley, but he knew Clark was right about. He pulled his camera from his backpack. He took a few breaths to ready him at the American's chest. He did not say a word. So he raced along the path for a block, then made a right up into another dorm window, desperate to find anyone who could save him. things off his left shoulder.
Two Ducati
We'll catch up with
DFLs.
you. I need one. Grab Hazelton.
Ducatis? Jack Ryan?
Colin Hazelton never stood a chance. Moved off quickly, but
Ducatis.
still casually. They stepped over to the wounded man, who was now trying to crawl away, and they knelt over him. The leader began feeling through Hazelton's pockets and then his shirt, finally laying his hand on the money belt hiding there. He yanked the hem up over the man's corpulent midsection, used his stiletto to cut free the sweaty, and Tiger knocked the American's feeble grasp away and stood up.